Now, Gracie Spinks was just 23 when she was murdered by a stalker 3 years ago. Since then, we've been following her parents' campaign to get every police force to have a stalking advocate. That's an independent specialist who offers advice and guidance for victims. But that work is still very much ongoing. BBC Breakfast investigation has found the majority of UK police forces don't have any advocacy services available at all. So if we break that down a bit, that means of the 40 forces that responded, 15 said they employ independent advocates, 22 said they don't, and 3 were unclear. Gracie's parents have been to visit a police unit dedicated to tackling stalking, and Abby Smitten was given exclusive access to go with them.
This moment has been a long time coming for Richard Spinks and Alison Ward.
Richard, nice to meet you too. Welcome to Cheshire Police HQ.
Good evening, Derbyshire Police. How can I help?
Hiya. I'm just wanting to report something that happened with a supervisor at my work. He became obsessed with me and wouldn't leave me alone, and basically loads of things happened. He was sat waiting at my horse's field, waiting for me to go there, which scared me a lot.
Their daughter Gracie was murdered by a stalker in 2021. This 101 call was heard at the inquest into her death.
I'm just worried that the next time it happens to someone else, that you're not going to, it could be worse than just following me and not leaving me alone. He might kidnap someone. Do you know what I mean?
4 months after that call, Gracie was killed. Today, Richard and Alison are visiting Cheshire Police to see how the force's harm reduction unit protects victims of stalking.
This is our office. James there is one of our 4 probation officers that's aligned with the unit.
So did you start off quite small and sort of build up to this?
Yeah, absolutely did.
3 of you, 4 of you, just sort of...
Yeah, this is 8 years in the making.
At the inquest, Derbyshire Police admitted it had failed Gracie. Since her death, her parents have been fighting for change to require all police forces to employ dedicated stalking advocates who will be there to provide help and support to victims, like Vicky at Cheshire Police.
When we first meet a victim, you are meeting a person in absolute crisis a lot of the time. You are not a police officer there to take a statement. You are somebody to talk to vent to, who's also going to provide you with some knowledge, some information about how to keep yourself safe. We know what we're talking about. We specialise in stalking, and we're going to hopefully guide you through the process.
Gracie's parents' vision is to have someone like Vicky in every police force.
Yeah, this is kind of what we want to push out, isn't it?
Across the country, yeah. The same service should be available to wherever you live. And I think this is a great place to start. Why can't it be done in other police forces?
What works here might not work in another area, but at least...
The unit's been running for 9 years now. As well as support for victims, it works with psychologists to rehabilitate offenders and trials new technology to keep people safe.
That's essentially what the perpetrator wears. It means with a high degree of accuracy, we can see everywhere where this person goes, where they go to sleep, where they've been. The person that we want to protect has this little device. They have this little clip, you can put it in your bag, your pocket or whatever, and it essentially does the same job. So if these two things come close to each other, it alerts both parties, but at the same time it's alerting our control room on an emergency call.
Other forces are now reaching out to Cheshire Police to find out how they can improve their response to stalking cases.
I think most forces recognise they can and should improve their response. How they go about that will be different, and we can learn from other areas. I've learned from Richard and Alison today. It's made me think about the way we approach stuff and the things that we say. So I suppose the point I'm making overall is that it's very much a journey.
I say we've spoke so many times on different.
And we feel like we're supported more, from people that want exactly the same as us and are doing it, and from experience.
That's what will change it.
I just wish they'd have got this service from our police force at the time she made her first initial complaint report. because she'd still be alive today.
Yeah, I know, we were let down, but we've got to now, for our own sanity, push forward in a positive way, because it's the only way forward for us.
It's 3 years since Gracie died in June, and we've been on this with the same sort of passion and intent right from the start, so it will be a long process, but I'm fairly confident, very confident, that we can make a difference, that Gracie wouldn't have died for nothing.
Abby Smitten, BBC News.
Joining us now is Vicky Lowry, who works as an independent stalking advocate at Cheshire Police Harm Reduction Unit. Hi, Vicky. And the interim chief executive of the Susie Lamplugh Trust, Emma Lingley-Clark. Hi, Emma. I'm fascinated by how this works, Vicky. So what do you do? How much interaction do you have with someone who is a victim of stalking?
I have a lot of interaction with a victim of stalking, primarily if they don't know their stalker or they're an acquaintance of their stalker. I will have that client referred to me as soon as they make a police report. And if it's then appropriate, I will meet them in person, on the phone, email, online via Teams. And I will be with them until, in reality, they're quite sick of me. I'm in their life for as long as they need me. And that's not decided by the investigation as to whether it goes anywhere. It's as long as they are able to make themselves feel safe with me on board, or as soon as they're able to safeguard themselves, then I step away. So,
because interestingly, I was just reading, I think with one, you had, I think, 150, yeah, that's it, in an 8-month period with one victim, 150 odd texts, 62 phone calls, 17 emails, 6 home visits. Now, this is obviously someone who was very concerned and wanted to keep you updated as well with every text that was coming through to make sure the evidence was there. And that's also important for having someone who just believes you and understands what it's like when it's flooding in at the most unexpected moments and impacting your life when a stalker interferes.
To be clear, a lot of that was nothing related to the investigation or any evidence, hence why for a police officer to receive those calls, it can be quite overwhelming and distracts them away from the investigation, whereas my role is just for that victim. So if that victim wants to ring me because they feel hypervigilant or paranoid, or they think they've seen something, or just a query of, do I need to report this? Then I'm there.
So what's the training you have for this?
I went on a course called the Isaac course, run by Paladin. But on top of that, I've been mentored very well by my colleague who's got a wealth of experience. I've also had in-depth police training in terms of investigations. Not that I complete any of those, but I need to have an awareness so that I know the process, how officers work, the challenges faced by police officers, so that I can guide them and also guide the victim and keep them on board with what's going on and allow them to understand why there might be some delays or a period of quiet.
Emma, I don't like to use the word statistics around stories like this because this is people's lives, isn't it, who are really damaged. But as I understand it, if an advocate is involved, it completely changes the dynamic of whether there can be a successful prosecution. Is that right? Do you want to sort of go through how that works in practice?
So we did some research recently that basically showed that approximately without an advocate, it's 1 in 1,000 of the chances of conviction.
Say that again.
1 in 1,000 without an advocate.
OK.
When an advocate's involved, it goes down to 1 in 4. So we see real success when an advocate's involved.
Because they're taken more seriously?
I think it's basically because what happens is the advocate is constantly working to ensure that any information the victim has is fed through to the police. I think, in general, it's about making sure that the right protective orders are in place, all of those sorts of things, all the things that Vicky just talked about.
And do you think, alongside all those practical things, it's about making people more confident to tell their story and to not shy away from that? Do you think that's a big part of it?
Yeah, so one of the key things that advocates do is empower victims to make sure that their voice is heard, so that victims know what their rights are in terms of the legal process. And so that often helps just keep them engaged.
Do you find that, Vicky, in practice, that... I mean, obviously you're not going to talk about individual cases, but over time, have you seen people change in their demeanour and how they are because someone like you is alongside them, you know, helping them along the way?
It's an absolute privilege to work with victims of any type of abuse, but stalking specifically. We often, and we always say this, there's a pinnacle moment where you see a shift, and you can often meet a victim the first time and they're at crisis, they're emotionally drained, they're isolated. Stalking is a very isolating crime, and it's not very well understood. They often feel alone. And then when you help them make decisions, take that little bit of control back in their life, they start to shift, they start to gain confidence, they start to try and get back to some form of normalcy. And I think that we can't forget that just because police are involved doesn't mean the stalking's going to stop. We have to make sure that victims are aware of that and that they are able to try and live some sort of normalcy, even if this continues, but the confidence to report, knowing they'll be believed and knowing that they'll be validated.
Do you know, one of the things that occurs to me, and I don't know if it's for either of you, is that there'll be people watching this now who think, believe, know that they are being a victim of stalking. They haven't done anything about it, and it's having that effect on them. And they might be thinking, well, I might be living in one of the areas where you don't exist, where, you know, as we've seen from the figures, and they might be thinking that's a reason not to come forward. And that's worrying in itself, isn't it?
There is resource available. We do have the national service.
So you would encourage people, don't worry about that part of it.
Yeah.
Come forward anyway.
Yeah, so do ring the National Stalking Helpline, because we work with any police force. We are limited in our numbers, you know, and that's one of the key things is that we do need more funding for stalking advocates in general, but our advocates will support any victim of stalking.
It's very good to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Emma and Vicky. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To hear more on this story, you can listen to the podcast 5 Minutes on Policing Stalking, a postcode lottery, which is available now on BBC Sound.